Okay, so welcome to today's class. And what we're going to be focusing on is the art and craft and mysteries of storytelling as a sacred art, but also really focusing on story as a sacred healing art, as one of those key tools that gives us access to our humanity. And to me, there is nothing more important in the world. I mean, literally, to me, this is like, they say that the very first cell of a human is a cell of the heart. And that's the very first cell that comes into being. And to me, when we look at the building blocks of this time, and the specifically the building blocks to a path towards thriving, the way that I understand is sacred storytelling is like the first brick on the road, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It's the foundation to that pathway of thriving. And it's that pathway of giving us access to our divinity, our full life force, and understanding ourselves as creators. So this is not a normal storytelling class. I'm not going to give you the 6 bullet points for how to create a story, because to me that's actually very dangerous storytelling, and that invites people into this idea that we can manipulate, genetically modify stories by cloning them and creating stories that don't have hearts or souls. And I feel like we're in a big world where a lot of that's happening right now. And so what I'm doing is we're coming back into this very foundational approach to storytelling. So a little bit of an introduction to where we're going to play. It's in a different kind of landscape. And by now you know that my name is Leah Lamb. I am a devotee to the world of storytelling. I grew up on a farm in Vermont and got to live in a time where I could wander in the fields and the creeks and the trees. And I really believe that's where my life as a storyteller began, because I was given all this time to have access to play with my imagination and to deeply listen and to commune with the natural world. And the natural world became an ally and a friend at a very, very young age. It became the place that was my truest places of home. And I feel really honored to get to say that, because and we live in a time when we have so many stories about our natural world and earth and the environment. Isn't it a trip that we use this word environment to describe our home? To describe, it's like it makes it sound so, gosh, I can't believe I just wrote about the etymology of environment. I forgot it. Perimenopause. It's a cruel thing. But anyway, the memories come and they go. But the when we start talking about, in terms of our history, and I'm going to invite you to think about your own history. What makes you who you are? Because that's one of my key questions. I've got 3 key questions that I'll be asking you today. Why are you here? Like, seriously, why are you here? Why are you giving an hour of your life to the world of storytelling, and not just any kind of storytelling? It's very blatant in all of the ads about the sacred storytelling, that relationship, the divinity of yourself and to your humanity, and that can be like a literal question for this hour, or the soul question. It's like, what is the essence of your soul? What is the essence of your soul? And this is beginning to come into, this is another question, which brings us into a mythic expression of seeing ourselves. So I'm more than just a human. My soul has this essence that it's expressing. And it expresses different elements and aspects of that essence in different environments and different aspects of the alchemy of who we're around. I'm getting to visit my family right now. So you're going to hear a lot of slamming because I've got little nephews, And there's nothing greater than coming close to our family to get to re-meet all those young parts of ourselves, right? And so like different aspects come alive. And then as adults, we get to be like, okay, well, oh, look at that aspect of me that's coming alive, this alchemy. Will I feed that, or will I have the reins on that, or will it take charge? And so there are all these different aspects of ourselves where we play different roles in our lives. And so that question that I'm asking, what is that core essence of your soul? Because when you always know what your core essence is, even in those moments when you can get wobbled off your center, you can come back to, okay, where's my true north? How does my essence truly yearn to be expressed? And how can I navigate through all the channels of life? So I love that one question. The other question that I'm going to invite you to wonder about. And I love that idea. You answer a question, you kill it, right? So we don't have to answer these questions. We can just be in a delicious place of wonderment. And when we're wondering, that's a very powerful place to be, because our ego gets the day off. You know, I was one of those people, I loved getting A's. I loved all the accolades. I was, president of the student association, on the debating club. I was editor of the school newspaper. I did all of it. I loved all that external accolades, right? I loved being right. I loved having the right answer. So if those of you who are in that camp, I really understand you. When we get to wonder, it's like we get to give our ego the day off and take a little break and not know anything. Your job isn't to know anything. Your job is to listen. And so I want to invite that space of deep wonderment. Can you listen to an idea that you've never had before? Because all of a sudden you're opening to yourself to receive the guidance from the unseen world. And so you're like, wait, how did we get here? Because to me, that place is the access point to sacred storytelling. This is the access point that deep, profound listeners, any storyteller is a listener first. Any story that's worth their weight in gold or their weight in salt or whatever that expression is, they are a listener first. And so I'm inviting you into that deep state of wonderment about who you are and what you are called for. And what that, I recently heard something, I'd never heard it before, and maybe you've been with us for a while, that we can't control what we want. You've got no control over what you want. It's like that, those are the pieces that just come through you. You want what you want. And another way of looking at this is around the word desire. Desire is a word that's been hijacked and trampled upon and made into something naughty and all woven and knotted up with lust, But desire is related to the stars, the patterning of the stars. And it's speaking to almost our astrology. That what we desire was actually part of our destiny. That's what it is, desire, destiny. It's about relating to the stars. And so when you really listen to those deep wants or those deep desires, what you're listening to is the call of your destiny towards you. And I really believe that all of this comes through or is squashed or muted and not allowed to come through the stories that we tell. And so this place of coming to the table and listening, I feel like is one of the most profound places that we can sit together. And, this kind of listening, it can come from, some say, where does inspiration come from? It's such a great mystery. Imagination. It really is the last frontier. Like there's nobody can buy, well, actually that's not true. I was going to say nobody can buy real estate of your imagination, but they have. I would say that a lot of people's imaginations have been unknowingly hijacked by Hollywood. And so how much real estate has been taken, how much of the real estate of your imagination about what is possible has been hijacked by, big Hollywood movies. I'm always amazed. I go to the movies lately and like the previews are violent. And I'm like, hey, I did not sign up to receive that story. Why is it being jammed into my brain? And so let's talk about this. Let's get on the same page. What is a story? What is a story? This is a real question I'm going to ask. Those of you can place it into the chat box. You can speak out loud. There's no wrong answer. It's just what is emerging. And in this way, we're actually practicing the act of eloquence. So when I ask a question, some of you, maybe nothing's there and you can delight in the deliciousness of silence. But perhaps some of you are feeling this kind of percolation. You know that something wants to be spoken, but you don't even know what it is yet. And that's that moment of deep listening to that intuition, that piece that wants to emerge, and then trusting in the act of eloquence. And eloquence is that piece where you don't have to know what you're going to say, but it's about breathing and deeply connected so that you can hear and receive and then give the gift of what you received. KP is saying it's a chronicle of emotions. A story is a chronicle of emotions. I love that. I've never heard that, KP. And what it's making me think of is this idea of what do stories carry inside of them? And so we're gonna back it up just a little bit and come to some basic agreements. I think that are out there in all the ancient religions agree that that this body it's a vehicle for a soul, right? And our souls live inside the body, and the body is a vehicle for that. And as I understand story is a vehicle for spirit. And spirit can live through us through story. So when we invite a story, consciously or unconsciously, to come and live through us, now I'm bringing you the spirit of joy. If I tell you a joyful story, oh, I can bring you the story of fear. I can bring you the story of hate. I can bring you the story of disruption. We're being surrounded by those kinds of spirits. Think about what stories do you invite to sit with you at the dinner table when you're talking story with your friends. I can bring you the story of a healed, broken heart through the pure transmission of the story that I bring you in the spirit in which I carry it. So thank you. I love that. So we're right. And all those emotions I'm calling kind of like the energies, the spirit of a certain energy. Melanie is saying, what I wanted is already manifesting. Yay. I'm so glad to hear that. Judy is saying, a story is the voice of my heart and the knowing in my gut. Oh, that's beautiful. I love, they say, I've heard, I don't know the science on this, but I've heard that, we have, there's brain cells in our gut. It really is this other intelligence. And, it's like this whole idea of like, what is it to be in connection with that other intelligence, that core power? Okay. Another way of looking at a story, very unromantic way. It's looking at it, we know that humans often look at, themselves in reference to the latest technology. So I'm going to say that a story is an operating system. And in the operating system, we learn our values, we learn our belief systems, and we learn about what's possible. So think about, the fairy tales that you were told. Think about the TV that you watched growing up that showed you what roles you could have, how much money were you going to make, what kind of house should you have, what was relationship supposed to look like, what was your role supposed to be as relationship. I think as women, it's a pretty wild time, and like, oh my God, like when I really think about it, it's like the role of women has changed so much in my lifetime, rocket shipped, and so it's like, and that we've had to break through so many of the stories that we're told. That's a very unpoetic expression of what a story is. And when I went for a walk through the canyon, I live in Topanga Canyon outside of LA. And when I was walking through that canyon, it's where I get so much of my inspiration. And I really heard, I swear to God, the trees were like, Leah, you can't keep calling stories operating systems. It's not working. And I'm like, it works because it kind of explains the job. And they're like, oh, no, a story is a library of the soul. And I was like, yeah, that's so much more beautiful. I got to give you guys credit for that. I give that to the trees, because it's the land of that place that brought that bigger truth to it. And to me, it's like stories are a library of the soul. And to truly understand story and to be a student of story is to be part archaeologist. Because to understand a story, you have to understand the time that it was born in. And the person, what was the person that told that story and what were they in service to? So were they in service to love? We've got a lot of stories right now that are being told in service of disruption. That are actually like waging, big wedges between people. And every time I hear one of those stories, I think about some of the most basic principles of life. Which is that I really believe that, when we're talking about the sacred, we're talking about energy that's here, that's in service of life. Life that's in service of life. So when I think of a story, and we're going to start entering into the realm of sacred story, but before I go into that realm, I just want to finish this thought around when we're looking at how to understand a story. You have to understand like the time that it was born in, the person that was, what were they in service to? What was the language of the land, and how did it speak? What language could that person use and not use? There are certain stories that I hear from different cultures. I understand that even though I'm reading the words, there's no way that I can possibly get the full transmission. I don't speak the language of that place. I don't speak the language of that land. I don't speak the language of that time. But certain threads of the story can still come through. But it's like understanding that the blind spots are so big you don't even know how many that are there. It's like having a piece of Swiss cheese, So you say, okay, thanks for what I got. But when we're looking at this, now we're looking at this idea of that it's a hysterical, not a hysterical, a historical landmark of a certain moment in time that has so much strength that it's able to be carried. And that's where stories are amazing because they break all the rules of this planet. They defy entropy. Everything on this planet that is made of matter falls apart. But stories are not made of matter. They are carried by beings who are made of matter. They live on their own through us and through how we carry them and how we tell them. So in this way, they're very mysterious. We have a story around us that's over 4,000 years old. At the very core of it, it's the fear of death. It's an old story. So I always say, be careful when you start looking at the old stories. It's like you get to learn a lot, but always have that state of wonder. Is this a story that deserves the breath of my voice to be repeated? Do I want to keep giving this story life? Or is there another way that it wants to live? Okay, so the one other piece I'm going to speak to right now is around sacred storytelling. So a sacred story. What defines a sacred story? What makes it sacred? Do we have any ideas in our world on that? What makes a story sacred? What defines it as sacred? Um, you know what? I hope I'm saying your name right. Vila is saying, wow, at the concept of breathing life into stories. Yes, yes. I'll speak a little bit more on that too. Melanie's saying something that is only for me, something that's Hi there. What patient people you are. Our 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 internet just went out. Okay. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure that you can hear me. Can someone come off mute and tell me if you can hear? Yes, you can. Okay, great.
Yes,
I'm
we
just going to
can.
reposition myself. And any deep thoughts while we had that delightful moment of pause and quiet? Okay. So I'll continue. I always think these are great moments. You know, when you are doing professional storytelling, you know, one of the key things that we always teach is be work with everything. Everything is your material. And so, you know, what story are you in? Are you in the story of hysterics of I can't believe internet just went out during this class? Or can you say, ah, what aspect of the kind of spaciousness that was being invited by this invitation for wonderment came into being in this moment, you know? And my, what patient people you all are to have hung out to see there'd be a return. I'm so impressed. Okay, so connection with a higher power that flows through someone or something, and an honoring of this truth. That's what Judy is saying about a sacred story. Right. So we're going right back into like this. What is a sacred story? And here's the piece that I'll just speak to is that when we call something sacred, it's a setup for failure almost, because when we say that something is sacred, just by employing the language, we're inherently saying that something else is not sacred. It's so weird. You know, that mountain is sacred, that mountain is not sacred. Like what? Doesn't, you know, but I understand what they're saying. It's like what one of the things, what are we saying when we say that is that we're saying, I recognize the life in you. I recognize the spirit and the soul in you. You know, that's what I'm saying when I say that something is sacred. My teacup is sacred. This chair that I'm sitting on is sacred. It was made of something that was alive once, and now even in its death, it's holding me. You know, so we call something a sacred story. We're saying, ah, I see the life inside you. And not just any life. I see the life that is here in service of life. So when I hear a sacred story, I'm just like, oh, I feel so good. I feel more alive. My heart feels open. I'm often inspired. I want to work out a little extra more tomorrow. I'm going to stop eating sugar, and who needs caffeine? You know, it's like I feel more alive and I want to be part of life even more, right? Now, there's other kinds of stories that are around us. So I just want to mention those. We're surrounded by zombies. Okay, so these to me are like they're Death Eaters. They're feeding on life. I know them after I watch some TV, and I kind of want to die a little afterwards. And I feel kind of icky and gross. And I start having nightmares. And I'm haunted by these stories. They interrupt my day-to-day thoughts. I don't watch a lot of them, to be honest, because I can't, you know, because I don't watch enough of them to be numb, you know, and so it's like very affected by the television I watch. And so I really want to invite you to really think about what are you nourishing your consciousness on? What is the news source that you are taking in? What are the stories that you and your friends and your community and your family are telling to each other? What are the stories, the books that you're reading? And not to say that anything's right or wrong, but just know what kind of story am I putting myself in relationship to? And because what I understand is like when you start having the sacred storytelling goggles, you know, it's like I put my goggles on. It's just like when you go, you know, into the water. You know, if you're diving in the deep water and you're down there and all of a sudden you don't have anything that is there. Oops, hold on. Should I go back onto the connection?
Oh, you're all good.
Okay. We're working with the internet. Thank you so much. You're good. You're good. It's like when you dive into the depths of the water and you don't have goggles, you can't see what's there, you know. And so when you can't see what's there, then what are you doing? It's like you're kind of like going off in the blindness of it all. You're kind of like, I don't know, maybe there's a shark there. It's kind of blind, you're blindly making your way through. But when you put on your sacred storytelling goggles, and you can be like, oh, well, that's a sacred story. I'm going to go hang out with that guy. And, oh, that's a fear mongering story. I'm just going to notice what it is. And we're not saying I can't listen to you. You're going to bring down my vibe. I live in California. There's a lot of that. That's not what we're saying. To me, that inspires a sense of fragility that I don't want to continue or perpetuate, because we're going for resilience and strength. I can see you for what you are and wave you on your way and not take you into the garden of my consciousness, because this is what I really want you to become guardians of. And this is what we are when we're storytellers. Our role is guardian. There's a word in Welsh that speaks to that specifically. If I pronounced it, I would so muddle that word. I can't do it, but it's a beautiful word, and it talks about the role of the storyteller as guide, and the guide between the dimensions. And so when we take this role of storyteller, it's a mighty role that comes with a great deal of responsibility. And as we become more and more and more involved in our consciousness, our capacity for consideration, I really invite you into this depthful way of considering what kinds of stories are you carrying? How conscious are you aware of the power of your language and what you are creating and co-creating with those around you? So we talked about the sacred stories. We talked about the zombie stories, and it's like a great zombie story is Jaws. Just a quick example. Think about how much damage that one story did, and how much it planted fear of sharks, this keystone species. When Peter Benchley, the creator of that story, discovered what had happened, he spent the rest of his life trying to undo the damage of that one story. 3 generations were still living with a legacy of it. And then there's these clone stories. They look like a story, they smell like a story, they act like a story, they feel like a story, but you can't remember them because there's no spirit in them, there's no soul in them. And those we'll see a lot in the marketing space. And they understand how the human operating system works, and so they can program the operating system. And so those are the stories that leave you wanting for more, desiring something, and so they leave behind a kind of hunger. And so I really feel like those kind of stories are kind of the bedrock of our consumerism modality. So as sacred storytellers, one of the things that we're doing is we're stepping into this deep, profound way of healing. I feel like one of the key aspects of the building blocks of life, which is that element of generation, of that giving and receiving. Because that's what's happening when we step in as storytellers. As sacred storytellers, we say, my gift is so profound to give. The wisdom that I have cultivated by understanding my life and the challenges and the pitfalls and the suffering and the beauty and the joy and the lessons learned. I've taken all this time to cultivate this so that I can give it away as a gift, as a present to you. This giveaway, that's what we're doing. We're coming as sacred storytellers. We know that our voice is valuable, and it could carry people through all kinds of wild things. I'll tell you the power of a word. The Hawaiians say that words are so powerful that they can speed the world up or slow it down. I talk fast. I can't help it. I'm from the East Coast. But when we slow down, we slow the pace of life. The Sicilians say that words are so powerful they poke holes in the universe. Think about that when the temperature starts getting raised. The Maori say that the words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. In Australia, there's an idea that the stories from the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. In Japan, there's a word called kotodama, and it means word spirit. And it speaks about the spirit of the word before it's even come into existence. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to say that again because that one always gets me. That the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So it's really one of those things to reconcile with. How are we using this extraordinary tool What are you giving your life force to? And what are you allowing to exist in the garden of your consciousness? The reason why I always invite you to have your videos on is because truly, like, what you say and how you hold the space calls forth what is said. I don't understand it. It's wild magic that happens. That this is a co-created environment. It's a co-creative space. Yeah, Melanie, it's spirit. I love that. I like your icons too. Those are fun. So I want to teach you one. We're going to talk about love medicine today, and I want to teach you one little piece to play with, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of walk you through the School for Sacred Storytelling, and I'll give you a little story at the end. So the story that I would tell you today, just as an example of love medicine, I was really thinking about it because it's kind of funny because there was a time when this story lived like a lion that was shredding every aspect of my being in my life. This story was ripping at the core of my existence. There was so much pain, so much suffering in me. It felt like my guts were always hanging out, and it was like anyone could see that I really truly felt gutted by the story. And that was then. And right now, this story lives like a kitten in my existence. And it's so sweet that there's almost nothing I can do with it but let it sit on my lap and listen to it purr while I pet it. So it's almost barely a story anymore. But what I can share about it in terms of how I understand story and love medicine, and how literally it was this experience of being gutted by the experience of a betrayal. And this is where I learned my wisdom I learned a lot about, getting into a relationship with a man that was recently divorced. And now I'm one of those wisdom people that will say, maybe take your time with someone who's fresh out of a divorce. This is where I got to learn that wisdom. Only one way to get wisdom is to earn it, and so I met someone who was recently divorced, and his heart was blown open. I didn't know anything about that kind of thing. And so my blown open heart met his blown open heart. And we loved. And we really had this great, beautiful, enlivening, inspiring love. One thing as a creator, it's like that when that kind of energy comes in, it just feeds everything that I create. So it's very fun, that kind of love. And it soon became very apparent that this was not the right time for this kind of love. He had a lot of healing to do. He had a lot that he had to mend. And I had a dream. I had a dream that we would be together. And so I did, to me, the most courageous act of love, which is I set him free. And I said, I love you. I'd love to be with you. But you've got some things that you need to go do. And go be free and go do them. I just have this one rule. And let me tell you, it wasn't a request, it was a rule. Don't mess with my friends. Do not get involved with anyone in my closest circle. I'm not saying this is right. Okay, I'm not saying that this is the right way to be. I'm just saying that this was how I was, and in that moment where I was like, I can handle a lot of different things, but don't mess with Texas. Just don't mess with my inner circle. It's not fair. I don't know yet. We could go on for a good long night of chatting over that issue, but we're not going to. That was my rule. And as the world turns, he ended up getting involved with one of my best friends. And it broke something inside of me, because it broke the dream. It broke the dream, it broke the fantasy, it broke the desire. And it broke something deep in me where this was no longer about him. This was about a pain that had been living so deeply inside of me that when he came close to it, it's like it just ripped it open. And deep inside of me was this deep fear of abandonment. And it was earned in a really honest way. It was known. And I'd spent my life trying to cover up that wound. And I'd done a really good job. I could have done a really good job of making sure I didn't get hurt, that nothing got too close to it. And then, a blown open heart blows open another heart. And before I knew it, there was access to that place in myself. And like I said, it was like I had like all my guts were on the outside. My heart was blown to bits. I couldn't think straight, couldn't concentrate. My friends were so sick and tired of hearing me talk about it. And I got to this place. It was also one of the places where I learned one of these key wisdoms. And I heard that this wisdom used to live in indigenous cultures. I don't even know which one, but that when people would come and they would gather in circle, and when they would gather in council, you could bring your issue, you could bring your challenge. But if you brought the same issue and the same challenge more than 3 times to the same people, it was understood in those circles that you didn't bring it back again, because those people couldn't help you with it. It wasn't like a banishment, it wasn't an admonishment, it was just a way of understanding how do we use our energy in a good way for the collective. I didn't know that. I had really patient friends. They had to hear about it for over a year. And I went to every which way for how to heal, how to get to this kind of pain, how to get to this peace. And one of the best things that I heard at the time was I went to my friend Craig and I was like, oh, my heart's broken. And he was like, oh, you mean your heart's broken open? That one rephrasing gave me a whole other access to myself. The other pieces that I would weave into this piece was that there came to this point where I had to go back to those original wounds. I had to disconnect it from him and stop being about him. And for a long time it was about him. And I was so angry. I was so angry. All this anger, it's like he just became the focal point for it. At some point, and I swear to God, it came from the stories themselves, where they said, recast him in your story. Because I was praying for help. And the story said, recast him in your story. He's not the bad guy. He's not the villain. What if, this is the greatest tool I can give you, what if, God, those 2 words, can you invite those in the hardest times? What if he was your master teacher and he came to offer you something that no one else was willing to take a hit for, and he's actually working in your service? Now look, I'm speaking from a mythological perspective. I'm speaking from mythos. Is this someone who I need to be friends with in my life? No. Is this someone who, we can reconcile in this? No, it was done. It's not, sometimes the human people don't need to work everything out. At this point, I was on a soul journey. And my soul journey needed to reconcile a betrayal that started in me. And where I had betrayed myself. And when I flipped the role and I took him from being the bad guy that did something to me, that created this cause of harm or blah, 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 and I said, oh, what are you giving me access to? He gave me access to this core wound. He gave me access to forgiveness. Whoa. He gave me access into deep practice of the Ho'oponopono prayer, which is the Hawaiian prayer of forgiveness, which, wow, it is one of the most potent pieces of medicine I know. I give it to anyone who's in a deep state of needing, of having that much energy going out towards, anger, rage, all those things. And he gave me a new way of living in a storied life. The pain still didn't go away. It was like a year and a half later, I'm still living with this pain. And I remember I was on Kauai and I laid down on the earth, spread eagle, and I begged and I pleaded for her to take the pain that I didn't know how to let go of. And there's maybe 2 moments in my life when I can say I was different 1 minute from 1 minute. And when I stood up from that prayer, from that deepest state of surrender, because I couldn't carry the burden of that pain anymore. And I'm actually going to change that word because I could. I could continue. But there was something in me that made a choice and I wouldn't. And it was at that true state of surrender when I knew that it was going to be a partnership, it was going to be an ally, that I couldn't do it all on my own. And there wasn't going to be any therapist that was going to make my brain work differently. There wasn't going to be any more inner child work. It was going to be something else. It was that deep calling on my relationship with the earth that truly was the last step in that phase of healing. So the story, it's like when I tell the story now, it just feels like a kitten. This kitten of learning about coming into relationship with forgiveness and coming into relationship with what is really betrayal, and coming into relationship to recasting myself and other in the story and giving ourselves different roles. And as I told you the story, I told you it from the perspective of now. I didn't tell you what it felt like fully. I didn't walk you through the agony and blah, blah, blah when I was there, right? Because I'm not that person anymore. I can't even pretend to be there. I can tell you, I can give you little glimpses into it. But that story doesn't even live in me in the same way. And to me, this is one of the most powerful aspects of working with storytelling, when we allow these moments of life to initiate us. And the initiation comes in how we retell the story so that we don't have to be that same person on the other side. We are truly changed. Something has shifted. And we can throw I always think of like the breadcrumbs behind us. How did we do it? What were the stages? What were the little pieces that we can hand to someone else along the way? When I was in Kuwait, there was one of the oldest living Holocaust survivors was speaking. So I drove to the other side of the island to hear him speak. And he told this one little piece that I could not shake out of my mind. Because, there's a lot of questions like, how did you get through? He was so happy. He was so joyful. He was so filled with love and so filled with life. And there's like, how are you doing that? And he said, well, I always pray that there'd be a better day. And he said, my parents gave him and his brother a blessing. And he was separated from his parents, and he knew that they were killed. And he said, but his whole life growing up, his parents had blessed him and his brother with the simple words of that he was loved and that his life was valuable. And he said he always carried that through every single day of the Holocaust. That there was never any doubt in his life, in his mind, in his heart, that he was anything other than valuable. I really think about that. Wow, to be able to hold that through those times, with such self-assuredness. And so I invite you to consider the language that you use around the people that you love, especially young ones, because you never know what your small little words might do in those critical moments. So that's our story. That's our class for today. If you feel complete, then I wish you on your way. And if something has like just the dragon is woken up and you're like, wow, I want to get to telling my own stories, and I want to know how to do this in my little world of sacred storytelling, then I'm going to stay on for a little bit and I will walk you through, I'll show you the journey of a sacred storyteller, and I'll introduce you to 2 classes that are coming up. And what I'll say is that we do have one big class coming up called Unity that begins in September, and the early bird special ends tomorrow. So this is a particularly hot moment to get involved if you're feeling the call. And then I also have 2 positions open for individual coaching. I do something called Sacred Storytelling Priestessing. And this is for people who are either in a position of really wanting to get their voice out into the world, or are wanting to really examine how are you living a storied life and how are the stories living through you. You're welcome, Angelique. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Melanie, I see you that you say that my house, to me, my spouse of my youth was calling my youth and got involved with a woman, the different man. Yeah, I confronted the woman by showing her that her husband and ex-husband loved me, and my spouse came back to me, and the lady and her family and different men got connected. It sounds like a lot of big relationships. Yeah, it's amazing when we can just come face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart with each other. How much can transform. It's and heal and how love. If there's anything to understand about love, knows no boundaries. No wonder it's considered so dangerous. Okay, so let me show you a couple of things. I wanted to, for those of you who feel called, I just want to show you briefly. Um, what is this path of sacred storyteller? So I'm going to share my screen. Show you a couple of things. And this is, a little bit of what I spoke about in terms of what are we doing? What are we when we are a guide? Like there's the alchemy of story, and it's bringing all these things together. We're taking we're standing as an elder. We're saying I call myself in responsibility to the next 7 generations. We create a sense of belonging. Like I'm not the only one that's lived with their guts outside of them or my heart broken open, right? But when we speak about it, we're like, right, we all sit there in the audience, we're like, oh, we're not the only one, and like there's a sense of belonging. The more honest we can be about the human experience, the more we know we're not alone in it. I don't think any feeling I've ever had is that original, but the more we can speak to it, the more we feel connected. It brings healing, and I'm not going to talk about that because I just spent an hour talking about that. It builds bridges between different worlds. I really believe that when you come as storyteller, it's like you come as a lover of life. I fall in love. I have not heard a story from anyone that I've not fallen in love with. And every time I stand before a community of people and I tell a story, I can't help but fall in love with them as well, because that's what it is to me. It is an act of love. It's an act of connection. It's an act of service. It's a giveaway, and you're standing into that beautiful, you're almost healing that reciprocation. So it's very different when you're a sacred storyteller. There's a very specific role that you're in that's really building this kind of connection, this old connection, and that peace in terms of that's been broken in so much of the world, that reciprocation, that giving and receiving. And they say that, especially in the United States, and that we particularly as a society have a harder time receiving. And I would say because it's like there's a lot of taking that happens here. And so in that way, it's like this is a place where anytime you stand a story in front of people and people just start to melt, and it's because they can shamelessly receive. It's like where we still know how to receive. So you're giving that to people and they give back to the storyteller. It's just big magic. Okay, there's a lot of different ways that we can be storytellers. I just told you about how I storytell, but different, if you see Martin Shaw, he tells it a completely different way. We all have our own medicine. And so I really like to invite you, and I said, what are you in service to? What's your medicine? And so some of us are midwives. We're going to catch the new stories. That's me. I'm catching the new stories of our time, and I'm birthing them through this time. Some of us are acting as mentors. We're telling wisdom stories. We're telling teaching stories. Some of our alchemists, and we're taking some of those old stories and we're saying, there are some bones in there that are really worth carrying forward, but there's also some broken parts and some old consciousness, and we've evolved a bit. And how can I maneuver and do some alchemy so that the story can live in another way in this time? Some of us are working as healers, and we tell story for the sake of healing. A lot of people out there that aren't doing that, right? We're surrounded by those. There's the wisdom keeper. There's the visionary. We need a lot more visionary storytellers who are planting beautiful seeds for our future that we can all have a role for ourselves inside of those stories. There's the archaeologist we talked about earlier. There's the dreamer weaver, again, catching the stories. And that's what, when we really look about, that's the archetype of the storyteller. It's the dreamer weaver. It's the spider, So when we look at this, this is the role of the storyteller. And so it begins with that deep sense of listening. We talked about that wonderment, courting the muse. It's the path to psychic silence, being able to listen to what is in my field of consciousness. Can I determine the different kinds of stories? Can I determine the different spirits and the energies that are living inside me? Can I decide what I'm going to give life to? But you got to name and claim the barriers that are in the way first. And those barriers, I've come to love them. I call them my initiations, the barriers to an open heart, I got to burst right on through. Not always fun. These aren't always fun, but they strengthen us and they make us resilient. They can be extraordinary when we know how to claim the story that we're in. Then we got to look behind. You got to know the stories that you're made from, or you won't understand the stories that you're going towards. There's a process of looking within in terms of like those stories. What created you? You get to explore your archetype of storyteller. We were just playing with that. We get to stand in the power of your gift. And one of the big questions that we ask is like, what is your medicine? What is the power of your gift? What are you giving to every story that you tell? in our classes, we do develop your skill and craft, but notice where that is in the process. Some places they'll have you develop skill and craft first, in terms of, when I come from a professional background of theater, and a lot of times there's a lot of that aspect of it. And there's another school of thought where you find the spirit, you find how the spirit wants to be living through you. You get access to that before it gets squashed, because that's what happens to so many young people. Their creativity gets squashed too young before they can get to it. There's some people who can write with perfect grammar but have nothing to say because they've got no connection to the spirit. And there's the people that got all the connection to the spirit but can't have any of the grammar. That's why we love to mix them all together. So eventually, we in this school of thought, I'm like, hey, let's get re-access to that spirit, to that genius, to that flow of life force, that energy. What are the stories that want to flow through you? And then we're going to work on your development. Then we'll develop your skill and craft. We journey into the mythos in terms of the original stories. I have a class called Mythos. We listen to what is needed in these times. Such a profound question. What are the stories that are most needed in these times? And then we look at the art of how do you change a story? How do you heal a story? And then we often come to that place of giving your gift. Mix it all together, and it is a web. So what I'll offer you also is that, so we have 2 classes that are coming up, and one of them is called Unity. And Unity is, that wasn't very smart. I clicked right on out of where I was going to take you. So I'm going to show you this really fast. And if there are any questions, by all means, please ask away. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you because that's what we'll do. So this is on the upcoming links class, and I'm going to give you this link in the chat as well, just so that you have it. And you can always find out what's coming next here. And I'm just going to tell you about 2 things that are happening. The first one is that we have this course, and this course is a 6-week online class. It's a creative intensive, and this is called Unity. What I would also tell you is that we also have a facilitator's course that's happening at the same time. So this is for if you're in a place where you are in a state of exhibiting leadership, where you really want to learn how to stand in your role of facilitating healing circles for other people, either with storytelling or not storytelling. Email me at info@leahlam.com, and I'll give you that information in a separate video and conversation. For people who are really wanting to get access to their creativity and are in that stage of really coming into finding their stories and expressing their voice, this course is for you. And this specifically is focusing on the heart chakra, on the piece of, what is your relationship to love? And really, it's like we're looking at unity. And I love unity because it's like how many different instruments can play together one song. It's a really amazing thing when you think about that. And so there's all these different spaces where different voices, different perspectives, different ways of being, and to this one harmonious way of being. And so we're looking at what are the stories, what are the energies, what are the things that are stuck inside your channel, your life force, specifically in the heart region, that are in the way of your fullest thriving and expression of unity, of love consciousness with yourself, with your family, with your friends, with your core relationships, and with the land itself. We have 3 incredible guest teachers, and I love our guest teacher series. I'm going to tell you why, because it's not your normal storytelling guest speaker series, because we're looking at what's the big story that you're living in, not just how you tell the story. So in these creative intensives, we're really looking at how is the story being lived through you. So we'll be working with Kelsey Barrett, who is going to be teaching a course called Crossroads of the Heart and the Mystery of the Rose. And it's going to be developing relationship with the natural world, specifically around herbs, to help access that heart chakra. We're going to be working with Polka Nix, and she's going to be talking about how you have ancestors that miss you, and really getting access to your ancestors, and what is that relationship, and how do you cultivate those kinds of relationships. So especially, when I can speak to myself, why is this important? We're talking about unity and love, like what? It's like, what is your whole big story, and how much connection do you have of it? And so many people in the country that I live in, or at some point immigrated here and were cut off from their ancestry. and they're cut off from their stories. And so we're going to talk about that as being also how is that and how does that affect your own heart line. We're going to be with Stephen Jenkinson, who's one of my mentors and teachers, and he'll be doing a piece called Matrimony, the Bone House of Love. And he is just truly a master teacher, an elder, committed wanderer, extraordinary eloquent, and I'm just tickled to pieces that he'll be with us again. It will be his third time with the school. So in terms of what we're doing in this course is we're going to be together for 6 weeks. We're together on Tuesdays. I never talk this much. They are highly interactive classes, and it's really all about you getting to be there and be telling your stories, be doing a lot of different creative exercises that give you access to the stories, how they're living through you, how they're working through you, how they're moving through you, where they're stuck. And when we get to those places where we're stuck, you get to use a lot of different creative techniques to maneuver, alchemize, transform, use those energies. And so we do earth-based practices. I talked to you about how laying down on the earth. We work with ritual. We will do a lot of different play. You get to work one-on-one with people. You get to work in small groups with people. At the end, you will come out with a story to tell, and we end every class with a storytelling festival. And so it's a place where we come together, and all we're doing is, you don't have to be an expert storyteller. We're really looking at people who say yes to life. That's really it. That is the thing that brings us together. We're saying yes to life, yes to understanding how to come into connection with our best selves, yes to saying I want to have a bigger, more whole relationship to love, to unity, to all the ways that I relate to life, and I want to get at the energies that could be stuck and in the way and move them. So it's like what these classes are is I call them therapeutic, but they're not therapy. So there's a slight distinction there. As you see here, we're working on the fourth chakra. Talked a little bit about this. The thing that's really unique about this class is what I would say it's a little bit like Marie Kondo meets the artist's way. Because as you're doing the class, you're also given an opportunity to create a sacred space in your home. And for those who take on that invitation, it's not required, but those who take it on, you're given the Psychic Silence guidebook, and it really helps you learn about who you are as a conscious creator. So it's almost like a course within a course if you want it, and it's a really kind of unique, special part of these 6-week intensives, so that you get this whole other workbook on how to have psychic silence. And the pieces that I'll just offer you is that that you will be fed and nurtured all kinds of inspiring, muse-informed, poems and quotes and podcasts. You'll definitely be well nourished in this way. You'll receive a lot of meditations and prompts for your own creativity. You'll be given earth-based practices. You'll learn a lot of core principles around how to use language, specifically around prayers, blessings, and how to create ritual into your creation process. You'll also have a supportive community, and one of the things I love about this is you also have your very own small group to work with outside of class. So for those who want that, a lot of people have said that's their favorite part of this class, is that they love getting to have that small group that is also supporting them, witnessing them, holding you accountable to what you want to be doing in, not just in those Tuesdays that we come together, but outside as well. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do it. It's just an offering, and it's a part of the structure that's designed to support your creative expression. But if it's not wanted, it's great. And some of these groups still meet. It's in like 3-4 years later, and they've gone off to create whole other classes together. I am so inspired by what people do in this space. 6 live interactive classes with me. You get 3 guest teaching classes. For those who register today, you come in, you'll get the early bird special. And this is a screaming deal. I gotta say, this class used to be $550, and I brought it down because the times are getting a little bit wonky. And so the early bird special is $350. That ends today, tomorrow. And you can see that there's a checkout code right down there. So you can see that checkout code that will disappear tomorrow. So you might want to get that. Now, there's a couple other special treats that are happening right now, which is that there's a whole semester. There's a final semester of the School for Sacred Storytelling. And the way that works is that I've been talking a lot, so I'm not going to talk too much more about it. But what I will say is that you can sign up for the last semester and it's half off of what the normal year program is, and you get all the recordings of all the classes in addition to that. So it's 11 classes that you get, and we have, I believe, 5 modules left. So it's a pretty amazing opportunity if you're really here, ready to blow the top off of your own creative expression, get access to your voice, tell your stories in a super empowered way, and feel that life force move through all aspects of your life. And that's why I love doing this. That's why I feel so lucky to do this, because when the world is getting weird and systems are getting harder and harder to live within, to me, getting to live in the world as a sacred storyteller gives me the golden key. It gives me the golden key to unlock so many different doors of different aspects of consciousness, and gives me so many different tools and ways to maneuver through these times. And that's why I'm so committed to doing this, because I feel like this, again, coming back to the beginning of this class, to me, this is laying the foundation, laying the pathway to the future I most want to see. So when we come back into relationship to our humanity, and when we come back into a relationship to humanity, step one is coming back into a relationship as storytellers, coming back into a relationship with how we use our voice. So after Unity, the 6-week class, we go into teaching stories. And teaching stories is a 4-week storytelling skills class, and it's almost an ancient lost art. Excuse me, not ancient lost art. It's almost a lost art, how to tell a teaching story. These are stories that are designed to really carry a specific message. And so carry a value. You don't need to know what you're going to do, but you'll get to come in, you'll be inspired, and you'll learn this new technique and modality. You'll come out with a story to tell. And as you do that, you will also, when you bunch them together, you will also see that you save $200. So you get both of the stories at the same at the early bird rates. So that if you know that that's something that you want, that's there. And what I'll say is that you can pay at one payment, or you can also, if you need to break them up into other payments, we have different payment plans, and you can see that when you register. So you have that link there. And a lot of information. If you have questions, I'm going to stay on. What I'll say is that the other thing, again, if you're in that place of leadership, the facilitation training program, we have 2 spots that are open, and that starts in September. And if you know that you just want a guide at your side and you're ready to make a massive breakthrough in how you're living your life in the storied way, or how you're telling your stories, I have 2 slots left in my storytelling sacred priestessing. So this is that private one-on-one work that I do. And you can learn more by emailing info@lenalam.com. Okay, so if there are questions, you can stay, but otherwise you can take yourselves off mute. We can give ourselves a little wave and say farewell, and wishing you all the best, and take good care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.